Hello, so here we have the evaluate the usefulness question, and here it gives us a good hint at the bottom about what we want to do. So we've got source B here, but before we read it, you want to remind yourself of what you're doing. So we have to, or we may want to, comment on the type of source. We might want to comment on who wrote it and when it was written, why this person wrote it, what they say, and what has been missed out. But the reason I've highlighted these first three things is because very quickly, if we look at this first line up at the top, it says source B is a diary written by a Scottish shipyard worker in 1918. So we've got our type right there, and we've got who wrote it, Scottish shipyard worker, and we've also got when. And 3 of our 5 marks can be made just with these 3 things from the heading, so long as we make a comment on why that might make source B useful as evidence of the restrictions of the Defence of the Realm Act. So I've just highlighted those 3 things even before I've looked at the question, because no matter what what the question has asked us to evaluate the usefulness of source B with regards to, every evaluate the usefulness question is going to give you this key information at the top. And we can get, notice it's out of 5, we can get most of the marks by commenting on these 3 things. But of course, now that we've done that, we want to have a look at what we're reading the source for, and we're looking at evidence of the restrictions of the Defence of the Realm Act. Okay, so we can now hopefully comment, or kind of start to begin to make comment on what it is this person says. In terms of why they wrote it, well, that's a bit more difficult, but we can make some comments based on knowing that it's a diary and what the diary's about, but we'll come back to that later. Let's focus now on what this person says, and I'm just going to highlight, or I'm going to begin to highlight the source. So it says, many of us are happy with the increase in work and orders, but there are also some who complain about the restrictions. So that sentence in itself doesn't really give us anything about the restrictions of the Defence of the Realm Act, which is what the question is about. The next sentence, however, says the Defence of the Realm Act, DORA, allows the government to tell workers which employer we can work for. So right there we've got a restriction. And in this source there may well be more, so take a moment and pause the video, have a look and see if you can find any more restrictions before we move on. So as you can see here, I have found 3 different sentences to highlight. Again, in this type of question, most of what's in the source box is going to be useful, but notice that first sentence, I don't think we can use that to answer the question here. It doesn't tell us anything about restrictions of the Defence of the Realm Act, but the other 3 sentences do, and we can use one of them or more to help us get marks as we begin to write our answer. Okay, so let's use what we've highlighted so far to write an answer to this question that's going to get us the marks. So I'm going to start using just what I've highlighted in that exact order. So I'm going to comment on the type of source. I'm going to say source B is useful because it is a diary. This makes the source useful because it is a truthful and honest, so let's leave it at truthful, should be enough, truthful account of the author's own experience with DORA restrictions. Now of course it's not enough just to state that it's a diary, the source tells you that, because we're being asked to evaluate, and evaluate means judge. We're being asked to judge the usefulness of the source. We need to provide a bit of explanation. Now, if you'd written, this makes it useful because it's a diary, you'd get nothing. If you write, this makes the source useful because it is a truthful account of the author's own experience, which is why any diary is useful, you're probably going to get the mark. But one thing the SQ often comment on is just this last little bit. We're not really being asked to judge or evaluate the usefulness of any source. We're being asked to evaluate the usefulness of this source, source B, from question 18 of the 2024 past paper, which is all about DORA restrictions. So just adding these 3 words, okay, it's not going to get me any more marks, but it will hopefully ensure I get the mark. But also I'm indicating to my marker that I really know what I'm doing, and I hope that helps you in your exam. So let's keep going. We've got more to say. Obviously we've got the author, right? So let's just say source B is useful because it was written by a Scottish shipyard worker. And again, we want to say this makes the source useful because I'm going to say they would, and you could write they, but the author, they would have been an eyewitness. I mean, that's okay, but let's make it better. To DORA restrictions. And again, now I'm not just commenting on why any source written by someone from the time would be useful. I'm really commenting now on why the author of this particular source makes this particular source useful. And then we can now, the final little thing I highlighted in that top line, source B is useful because it was written in 1918, and this means it was written during the period of DORA restrictions. So you can keep seeing that I'm mentioning DORA restrictions, but these are just the words from the question, and by doing this I'm really signifying to my marker, I'm really indicating to them that I know what I'm doing. I'm answering the question, I'm speaking about this specific source, and hopefully that will impress them as we go on. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to discuss what the source tells us written there on the page. I've highlighted 3 different points, so just for the sake of expediency I'm going to take the shortest quote and I'm going to write source B is useful because it tells us that also we are banned from going on strike, which is our right. Now you can see there I've written out the quote in full. As with the other question types, you always want to quote the sentence in full, shortening the quote, paraphrasing, using ellipses. These run the risk of us missing out the important part we're trying to evaluate. Now with the other kind of question types, the source question types, we're interpreting the sources, so we would say a little bit about what this quote means. Here with the evaluate the usefulness question, we need to make a comment on the usefulness. Why is this quote useful? We're not trying to interpret the quote, so I'm gonna just add one sentence. This makes the source useful because it is accurate to say that DORA limited workers' rights in 1918, because that's what that's where the time the question is written, the source is written. So I'm just going to use that information. Now I'm just going to show you something that wouldn't get marks. So this would get marks. Some of you will be tempted to write something as follows. So I'm just going to take the quote and I'm going to just write this makes the source useful because it shows that DORA violated people's rights and took away power from citizens during this time. And that's a lovely bit of interpretation of the source, but we're not being asked to interpret the source. Like I say, we're being asked to evaluate the usefulness of the source. So that's why this here, you want to do that and not this here. Okay, this second one we want to kind of not do that. We want to comment on the source being accurate. Okay, the quote makes the source accurate because it's true to say that DORA limited workers' rights. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that for us now. I've highlighted that. The last thing we need to do to get full marks here, to get a 5th mark, is to now maybe suggest the source is less useful because it's missed something out, so we can bring in our own knowledge. So I'm just going to write source B is less useful because it doesn't mention that DORA limited the rights of citizens, not just workers. For example, it banned the sale of items like binoculars. Now here really I just wanted to tell my marker that DORA banned binoculars. It's one of the things I remember from watching that video that we look at in class, right? You might be tempted to talk about, it kind of forced pubs to close earlier, or, that it limited the sale of alcohol, all the things that you can remember. But I'm just going to use this one point, and now that I've got 5 things that tell us why this source is useful, or one way in which maybe it's less useful, I'm hopefully going to get 5 out of 5. And you can repeat this process, you can apply this way of doing an answer to any of the evaluate usefulness questions, and you should get some marks. Be aware though, these first 3 marks just come from what is written about the source in the top line. So I can get those 3 marks without even reading the source, as long as I'm paying attention to what's written there. And even if I can't remember anything about DORA, as I've got here, well, again, I might still even get 4 out of 5 by using the top line and just one quote from the source. So that's one way to approach this. And I suppose one useful point just to end on is that this is only one way to approach this question. This is the way I've kind of taught you to do it in class, commenting on the type of source, the authorship, the date, a point from the source and a point of omission. But there are a maximum of 2 marks for source, for looking at the source, for taking points from the source. So you could take 2 quotes from the source instead of one that I've got here. You can also get a maximum of 2 marks for points of omission. So, if you're unsure about why the date makes it useful, you can ignore that, and then you can add 2 points of omission rather than the one I've got here. And finally, there is a comment on the source sort of origins that I've not made, and that is about the purpose of the source. And you can do this for any source. If you comment on purpose, you can get a mark. So I suppose in this case, the purpose of the source, it was written to record feelings and anger about the DORA restrictions, which makes it useful because it's not likely to be exaggerated, or it's more likely to be an honest reflection of the author's experience. I feel that's maybe a bit too similar to what we've said about the type of source, so I've not included it, and I would advise that you don't. Of course, there's no kind of double credit in, so if you say something and get a mark, you're not going to get a further mark for saying the same thing again. So that's why I feel that this process that I've shown you is kind of the best way to do it. But if you get stuck, just be aware there's other ways that you can maybe access the marks there too. Okay, so I think you're now ready to go and try one of these questions yourself. Good luck.